So I wonder if any of you have heard of the Bechdel test. So far, we're 0 for 400. Yay, 1, 2, excellent. All right, okay, that makes it 3 out of all 3 services. So, okay, 4. Okay, maybe you guys are just shy about knowing what the Bechdel test is. That's okay. It's a test that is given to movies or TV shows, and it came from a cartoon a few years ago by a cartoonist named Bechdel. And in the cartoon, she had 2 women talking, and they were talking about movies, and are you going to go see this movie? And somebody said, well, no, I'm not going to go see that one because it doesn't pass my test. And her test was that it had to have 2 women, female characters talking to each other about something other than a man for any length of time. It is shocking, you guys, how many movies do not pass this test. This very basic test. 2 women, named characters, talking to each other for any length of time about something other than a man. Half the movies made in 2014, a little over half, do not pass this basic test. So, one could get very bitter and very cranky if you look at all the statistics about the Bechdel test once you figure out that it doesn't happen that often. But what I like to do is just when I see it, I just like to really appreciate it and to try to give my money to those projects that are happening. The ones where they have 2 women talking to each other about something other than a man, about their lives or about whatever. It's, like they're people, like they have actual conversations and things. And what somebody found out very recently is that movies that pass the Bechdel test actually make a lot more money than those that don't. I guess they figured out that some of us will pay money to see women talk about whatever it is that women talk about. That's an actual quote from a blog. But we will. Frozen passes the test, one of those great classic cartoons in the past few years, and where 2 sisters talk to each other. And so when I see it, I try to really pay attention because there's something important happening there. And the fact that it's so rare makes me appreciate it even more. So I started thinking about the Bechdel test and the Bible. Does anybody know how many books are in the Bible? Anyone? 66, thank you. Does anybody know how many books of the Bible there are plus the Apocrypha, if you add them in? Anybody grow up Catholic? 73. I had to look it up too, it's okay. So there are 66 books of the Bible, and if you add in the Apocrypha, those books in the middle, which those are some really good stories, you get 73 books of the Bible. So does anybody know how many books of the Bible pass the Bechdel test? 4. 4 out of 73 because you have to include a conversation in the Apocrypha. So we have 4 books out of 73 books that pass the Bechdel test. Well, that could make you a little depressed. But as I said, what we can do is look at the spots when we get the rare opportunity to talk about a book of the Bible that passes it, which we have today. The book of Ruth is one of those books that passes the test. And I wondered last week when I was listening to the women do the dialogue, or actually, I don't know what you call it, there were 3 of them. Anyway, when they were doing the dramatic reading of the book of Ruth, the first chapter, as they started talking, I got a little teary. It was so beautiful. And I thought, why is this? I've heard this story before. It's a book of the Bible, and I thought, I wonder if it's because it passes the Bechdel test. I wonder if it's because it's one of those rare stories where we see a story of 2 women talking to each other about their devotion to each other. They're talking to each other in chapter 2 about survival, about what they're going to do literally to survive. And I wonder if that's why this story is so rare and so beautiful and so moving, and why I can appreciate it even a little more. One of the things that they were talking about at the end of chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2, when Naomi speaks, Naomi, and people have studied this, Naomi shows symptoms of clinical depression. Naomi, you may remember from chapter 1, has given up. She is done with everything. Her husband has died. Her 2 sons have also died. And all she's left with is this daughter-in-law that she didn't even want. And so she is depressed. She's done. She's given up on everything. And when Ruth asked her in chapter 2, can I go out to the fields and at least gather some grain? She says, sure, go ahead. She's done. Sending Ruth out to the fields was dangerous. I won't tell you what the Hebrew really means, but I will tell you it's not child-friendly when it's translated, don't let the men bother you. It's not okay what happened out there in those fields, but Naomi is done. She's not eating. She's not doing anything. She's done with life, and so she sends this daughter-in-law out into the fields. Naomi is depressed when she looks at the state of her world. When she looks around and sees all of those things that she can't figure out, she doesn't know why they happened, she's about to just give up. And I thought, this week, when I look back at the things that happened this week, I can't blame her sometimes. I don't watch the news. I've told you guys that because I don't like people yelling at me. So I just don't watch it. But I read the paper, and I read the internet, and the things that are happening can make you want to give up. When I was reading about the things that are happening in Gaza, I can't understand all of the conflict and how far back it goes, but I know that I don't like seeing children hurt, that is disturbing to me, that it makes me just want to give up because all of that is happening and there seems like there's nothing we can do about it. The other thing, I grew up in Ferguson, Missouri. You may have seen that on the news. I lived there till I was 8. It was a great place to grow up. It was just fine. It was lovely. There were all races of people who lived there, not always harmoniously. It was in the late 70s. But it was a good place to grow up, and when I saw it keep popping up in the news, I started following that story, and the thing that got to me the most is that there was a pastor who went and stood between the police and the protesters. And she stood there and she repeated, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And somebody shot her with a rubber bullet. When I saw that, I thought, well, why even try? When she's trying the peacemaking and she gets rewarded for it with violence. Those are the kind of things that make you just want to pack it in. And then the third thing this week, Robin Williams. I don't know if that was taken as hard in your house as it was in mine, but he was so beloved and so wonderful and so joyful. And to know that a person like that could feel this way, to want to just give up, was hurtful to all of us. On a positive note, I did find out that Mork and Mindy is now on Hulu Plus. And so I'm going to begin my children's indoctrination into the work of this man who had this huge breadth and depth of work that really touched all of our lives. Seeing that this week, and I don't even watch the news, but going through all that, I thought, of course. You look at the state of your world sometimes, and you just want to be done. And thank God for Naomi and for us that there's a chapter 2. I know last week Pastor Grunke left you with a cliffhanger, right? If you were here last week, can you remember what the theme of last week's lesson was? We're totally going to quiz you through the book of Ruth because it's just fun for us. The theme of last week's lesson. Well, mother-in-laws, sure. Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you, and then you'll get another quiz next week. The theme of last week's lesson was compassion, was this loving kindness that Boaz talks about, this great compassion that Ruth has for her mother-in-law. And so we saw that all throughout the chapter. And then we saw that that didn't matter so much to Naomi, but in chapter 2, after Ruth gets sent out into the field, she gathers the harvest behind the other workers, and that was something that only really the lowest of the low were sent out to do, because they were taking basically the trash, the leftovers, after the workers. And as I said, this was dangerous. You were out there in the fields with people you didn't know, and she began to do this, and she was working hard. You can see that Ruth is a hard worker. She's doing this, she's picking up the grains, and then Boaz notices her, and we don't know why. Maybe she was a different ethnicity or something like that. She was from a place not from there, but he recognizes her as a foreigner and says, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And the word he uses is young girl. Ruth wasn't yet 20 years old for all of these stories. He says, "What are you doing there, young girl?" And she tells him who she is. And because of her great loving kindness, which apparently the whole town has heard about, her great loving kindness to her mother-in-law, that's something to tell the whole town about. Her great loving kindness towards this person who is indifferent to her, he gives her a blessing. And it's the first of many. And he says, "May God's love cover you like holy wings. May God's love cover you and preserve you and reward you." And so she gets to eat lunch, and we get the sense that maybe she might have been starving, and maybe Naomi is at home starving, and when she gathers all the grains and she distills it down to just the grain, she carries home half a bushel. That's 30 pounds of grain. This has to be God's work. It's over and above what it is that they need. It's this huge abundance that's given to Ruth. So she takes it home to Naomi, her mother-in-law, and here's where it turns for Naomi. She recognizes, when Ruth tells her this story, that Boaz is the one who is supposed to take care of them already. Boaz, through this coincidence, even Ruth realizes that it wasn't by accident that she ended up in that field. Even Naomi, who had lost all hope, recognizes that even in the midst of this terrible situation, there was hope. Ruth ended up in this field and was able to provide for them. When people we know in our lives are depressed, there's not much we can do often. But what we can do sometimes is we bring them food, and we sit with them. And we see that this is what Ruth is doing for her mother-in-law, and when Naomi recognizes this as God's work, that's when things change for her. That's when she's able to say, God is saving us again. I was looking in the news for signs of hope, because I figured that there were some. I couldn't find any. It was really hard. And then I started seeing this statement everywhere that Robin Williams' wife gave after he died. She said, "It is our hope that in the wake of Robin's tragic passing, that others will find the strength to seek the care and support they need, to treat whatever battles they are facing, so that they may feel less afraid." So beautiful. And this, from this week, this is also the story of Naomi 3,500 years ago. That someone would seek for her the care and support she needed so that she could feel less afraid, less alone in the midst of her terrible circumstances. This story is a story of the gospel, and it's also our story. And when we look at these stories of Ruth and of Naomi, and I will give you just a little cliffhanger. You may think chapter 3 is rated R. That's how sometimes the third chapter of Ruth next week is written about. How's that for a cliffhanger? But I will tell you that things are not always what they seem. And the point this week, the point of chapter 2, the point of all of this for us as people of faith, you may be tested on this, is that we are not alone. Amen.